Hi everyone, it's LockheartQT and I'm finally mostly cold-free, flu-free now, as I've had a flu for probably the past week, 2 weeks, which has obviously affected my content on YouTube. So thank you all for the patience and thank you all for the nice get well messages in the comments and on Twitter and whatnot I've received recently. That I really appreciate it. So Mass Effect is getting another title from EA and BioWare that will seemingly continue the story from Mass Effect 3 and Andromeda's endings. And although we don't know which title and which next game, whether it could be, Mass Effect 4, Mass Effect 5, for the sake of this video today I will be referring to the next game as Mass Effect 5 just for, ease sake rather. BioWare have got a monumental job coming with the next game in the series, as we currently don't know when this next game will take place in the Mass Effect timeline, but BioWare have all of the different endings both from Mass Effect 3 in the Legendary Edition as well as Andromeda to now wrestle with, and today I'll be discussing how the different endings could all be implemented or considered for the next game in the series, whilst also discussing possible alternatives or ways BioWare might write them into the next game's story. So if you haven't already, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for the algorithm, as I cover all sorts of gaming and Mass Effect related content on the channel, and even consider following me on Twitter, or X as it's called nowadays, which will be on screen right now or in the description below. Also, as I know there will probably be a few people caught out by this, as I always have a few people complain about it, this is going to be your final spoiler warning for both the Mass Effect Legendary Edition or the original trilogy's endings, as well as Mass Effect Andromeda, so if you haven't played those games, now's your time to dip now. Mass Effect 3 has had 5 different endings. Perfect Destroy, which is the ending where Shepard survives the Reaper War and, essentially Shepard wakes up in the rubble. Destroy, where Shepard is killed off but the Reapers are destroyed. Control, where we use the power created by Cerberus to control the Reapers. That was the idea put in by the elusive man, that was his goal before he was indoctrinated. Synthesis, which is the fact that all organic and synthetic life is merged together, meaning that the Reapers and ED are merged with all living species, which creates a lot of questions and open-ended at the end of Mass Effect 3. And the refusal ending, which is the weird ending where Shepard basically refuses to do anything and everyone and everything is killed off by the Reapers. But the question is, how will the next Mass Effect game that has been teased to take place after Mass Effect 3 and Andromeda handle Mass Effect Andromeda and Mass Effect 3's endings, as there's obviously multiple endings in both games? Will BioWare choose one of the endings to be canon, as I talked about recently, with the Perfect Destroy ending potentially being canon? I talked about this a few days ago on the channel if you want to go watch that video. Or will it take place 100 plus years after Mass Effect 3, where the original trilogy choices don't matter that much? But if they went this route, then Control and Synthesis, a based world on one of those endings, in my opinion at least, would have a completely different vibe and story, with obviously the Reapers running around with all of the characters. I imagine a lot of people would be, pretty upset that these monoliths and beings that have destroyed entire planets and races are just living among them. So in my opinion it would create an entirely different vibe to a galaxy that the Reapers are completely destroyed in. So again, how would BioWare tackle all of these endings? Or will they allow players to import their save data or choose which endings they went for in Mass Effect 3, like they did with obviously Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition? Or potentially they could go the route that the Elder Scrolls went, where the second and third games have many endings and they basically take the effects from each ending and make it into one singular canon ending. Again, we'll have to wait and see, but let's get on with the video. Now that's a lot of questions to ask, so let's tackle all of these head on, one by one. Let's firstly take away refusal. I think everyone is in unanimous agreement here that you can pretty much take refusal out of the equation altogether. This ending is obviously the one where Shepard refuses to do anything and the Reapers essentially conduct a mass extinction event over the entire Milky Way galaxy, killing all life in the Milky Way galaxy, as we get that sort of end credits scene where Liara's hologram is telling the next people what to do potentially with the catalyst and the crucible and whatnot, but hey ho. This ending is instantly disproved by the fact that Liara and other alien races in the Milky Way galaxy have been shown off in concept art as well as trailers and audio for the next game, so refusal's pretty much, out of the equation straight away. As I stated earlier in a recent video on the channel, I talked about the Perfect Destroy ending being potentially the canon choice for the next game, as in my opinion it makes the most sense. Perfect Destroy was the most chosen ending across all platforms in both the Legendary Edition as well as the original release of Mass Effect 3. There's data from BioWare and EA showing that in full form. I'll have it on screen right now. In the Perfect Destroy ending, the end credits scene shows Shepard being very much alive, and a lot of people consider Shepard to not only be the main character but the face of both BioWare and Mass Effect, although obviously BioWare's a bit of a stretch because obviously you got Dragon Age and whatnot as well, but Commander Shepard and the N7 branding and iconography is so bold and it's so iconic that it goes outside of gaming. It goes into board games and merchandise, crossovers with other titles such as The Sims and Destiny 2 and No Man's Sky, so it makes complete sense that BioWare would potentially bring Shepard back and choose an ending where Shepard is alive so players can, you know, bring Shepard back, because obviously BioWare and EA have had dwindling player numbers and sales due to the fact that obviously the Legendary Edition's been out for a few years now. I'm not saying it's a bad game, the Legendary Edition is absolutely perfect in my eyes. Obviously Andromeda and Anthem have had issues, and I think that for BioWare to bring back both new players, casual players who maybe heard about Andromeda and Anthem not being that good, and the most important in my eyes, the OG fans of BioWare and Mass Effect, to bring them back, they could say, right, you get to play as Shepard again, here you go, and Perfect Destroy would be the only ending where you could feasibly do that very easily. Out of all of the endings proposed, Perfect Destroy makes the most sense. Throughout the original trilogy, the Reapers and Collectors are responsible for the extinction of entire races and galaxies, so it's only natural players would want to create a feeling of hatred towards them throughout the trilogy, obviously especially with what happens in Mass Effect 2, plus technically the Reapers and Collectors are responsible for certain characters' deaths, as well as with Cerberus, so the fact that you'd want to destroy them entirely makes the most sense out the three endings, because that is effectively Shepard and the Alliance's plan, and you know, bringing all the races together to destroy the Reapers. You're only then at the end of Mass Effect 3 presented with other options where you think, wait, hang on, maybe we could control them, maybe we could merge all synthetic and organic life. These choices only come right at the end of Mass Effect 3, hence why there was loads of backlash at the time that the Mass Effect 3 game came out. Although there's definitely an argument for Synthesis and Control being better endings, as I get loads of comments about this all the time, people saying, oh, what about Synthesis, it's technically a better ending for the galaxy. There's still the potentially, you know, looming threat of the Reapers in the background, the possibility that they could be reverted back to essentially being evil, to commit mass genocide across the galaxy. They could be reverted back to normal, or our control over them could be broken somehow, and this could definitely be a plot point for the next Mass Effect game. This could then pose a bigger problem for the galaxy as a whole, so I think that's another reason why Perfect Destroy is the better choice. Plus, in the footage and the concept art pieces, we don't really see that synthesis effect on any of the characters shown, and although this doesn't outright disprove Synthesis being the canon ending, it not being included with the next game, rather, I think BioWare would potentially show the digital green effects, especially with the eyes and the skin. They would actually show this in the footage we've already seen to visually tell people, yes, Synthesis is the canon ending, or Synthesis is being continued in some way in the next game. I feel like them not having that there at all is pretty telling, and it's pretty big, unless BioWare have retconned it or written it out in some way, but I can't imagine them doing that. Again, there could actually be no canon ending for the next Mass Effect game, and it could very well be like Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 3. If you don't know, Telltale made a series of point-and-click games called The Walking Dead, based on, obviously, the comics and the show, and in that game, it's like Mass Effect. It has loads of different choices and loads of different endings, and in Season 3, they made the pretty bold decision, in my opinion, to have it where all Season 2's endings are addressed, but they're all written out in some way. There's a cutscene at the start of the game that acknowledges your choice from Season 2, and then in Season 3 it effectively writes all of the endings to allow for the main character, who's called Clementine, to follow a particular path. So it's no matter which ending you chose in Season 2, in Season 3, Clementine eventually ends up on the same path or a similar path, with obviously just little nuances here and there. In terms of Mass Effect, an example for this would be potentially BioWare could just write around all of these endings except for refusal. I kind of feel like you can't really write around that, to be honest. So for Perfect Destroy, Synthesis and Control could all be written in a way where either the game takes place hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, or something happens where effectively all of the choices are merged into one path, so it doesn't matter which ending you chose, effectively the new protagonist or Shepard ends up on the same path going into the next game. I feel like that would piss off a lot of people, myself included, because a lot of people have their own headcanon and personal choices when they've been role-playing in the game, that in their mind they chose Synthesis, they chose Control, that was their story. So writing them out or writing them where they're all into the same path would potentially be damaging for BioWare in terms of story and writing. And in terms of importing save files and save data, which I've actually covered on the channel before, and how this could be done and the nuances with it, I'll go over it briefly here, but if you want to go watch that video, it does go into it in more depth and more detail. BioWare could definitely import save files from past games to the new game, but in modern day it would actually be quite difficult. You see, BioWare have already got two systems in place to cover this: shared save data on consoles via the Legendary Edition and PC, and the old Mass Effect archives and datapad, which allows you to go on a website and import your Shepard. The issue here is that although this could be, achieved on PC pretty easily via shared data from past Mass Effect games, console would be incredibly more tricky, and we already know that the next Mass Effect game is most likely, appearing on whether it be the PS5 or PS6, I'll go into that a bit later, but the next game is still in early pre-production, and rumours suggest a potential release anywhere from 2027 to 2029 and beyond. If 2029 is believed, which is obviously the year that's been thrown around the most, I'd argue and say, by industry insiders and people churning up the rumour mill, so to speak, then at that time the PS6 and the next Xbox console will well be out. They'll probably be a year into being in the market, meaning that BioWare would have to re-release the original trilogy via the Legendary Edition and Mass Effect Andromeda for those save data and save files to carry over seamlessly with the new game. There's always the possibility of them including an interactive cutscene or a comic, like how they did with Mass Effect 3, for new players to make old choices, but carrying over actual save data will always be the better option here. Plus, some older fans may get pissed off at the fact that they can't carry over their save data, they have to make those choices again, which again is definitely an alternative, but a lot of people would prefer to carry over all of their choices, as not every single decision we make in Mass Effect will be carried over. I think we all kind of have to live with that, because I'd argue and say Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 more so, there are little choices here and there that really impact the story in Mass Effect 3 with side quests, and I can't imagine BioWare finding an alternative for those to carry over. It would just be the big choices, so things like how we handle the genophage, Rannoch, and then obviously the endings. Those would be the bigger options and the easier options for BioWare to do an interactive cutscene or comic on. Now finally, what about Andromeda's ending? Well, at the end of Andromeda, Ryder and co defeat the Ket. Ryder saves their sibling and put an end to the Archon, who's the main threat in Andromeda. With the Archon out of the way, we activate Meridian, which makes all of the Helios cluster planets livable, as is the main, goal in Mass Effect Andromeda. It's for us to find new planets to live on and cultivate on. After this, the only major events in-game are an epilogue where we choose an ambassador for the Nexus. This is only the one where, it's only a real choice going into the next game. You effectively pick one of the NPCs to be the ambassador for the Nexus. Because of the backlash, Andromeda never really stood a chance, and it never had any follow-up in the story in-game from BioWare, as all DLC and I imagine sequels were probably cancelled at that point, as the series was put on ice from EA. Therefore, no choice from the ambassador for the Nexus has been made canon to this day, and without a sequel, this selection doesn't really mean much anyway. Plus, there is some speculation on the novelization for the Quarian arc being 100% canon in all of its decisions and writing, as many people speculated on it being the final DLC back in the day at the end of Mass Effect Andromeda's story, and sadly we never got any continuations, sequels or DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda. The only thing we got in-game really was a bit of a dangling carrot on a rod, so to speak, where we got that audio log at the end for the missing Quarian arc, as throughout Mass Effect Andromeda's story, you're finding the Turian arc, obviously you're on the human arc, but the Asari arc and so on, you're finding all of these species, and I think a lot of people were pissed off at the time because the missing Quarian arc not only had the Quarians on it, but it had all of the other Milky Way races that weren't included in Mass Effect Andromeda, such as the Volus, etc. So I kind of feel like people were quite pissed off at the time, and I remember that being the sentiment overall with the Mass Effect community. But why bring up Andromeda in this video? Well, BioWare themselves have stated that Andromeda and its story will feature in some capacity in the next game, and as recently as N7 Day 2023, we've been shown things that would also echo Andromeda returning as well. But will the game take place during Andromeda's timeline, or will it pick up right after Mass Effect 3's endings? Which original characters will return, and if they are going to make a canon choice, which one will it be? And just before we end off the video today, my personal opinion. So my personal opinion is that if you had to ask me, with everything we've been shown so far, with all the N7 days, concept art, rumours, etc., I personally think that the next Mass Effect game will take place in the far future. It will be a direct sequel to Mass Effect 3, but will also in some way incorporate Andromeda. I would love for BioWare to do a dual galaxy map, which I've also covered on the channel, which what I mean by that is by having us be able to explore Andromeda, perhaps the Helios cluster, as well as the Milky Way galaxy. I think having a dual galaxy map would be fantastic, or if that's something they want to, save for a potential Mass Effect 6 or 7, then that's cool as well. I don't mind if they have maybe one game set in the Milky Way, one game set in Andromeda, where we see characters such as Shepard, Liara show up. The only problem with them having a game set in the far future is the fact that characters like Garrus, Tali and so on will probably be dead. We'll probably be more, seeing more characters like Grunt, who were quite young in Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3, and then obviously they can age quite a bit. So we'll have to wait and see what BioWare does. I think it's really interesting though. Well, thank you for watching the video today, and tell me in the comments below, what do you think about all of this speculation? Do you think that one of the endings will be canon? Do you think none of them will be canon and they will allow us to make a choice, whether it be importing save data or a comic strip or something like that? Or do you think that BioWare will just simply write all of the endings out, as that is also an option they could very well do, and it's a lot of things that other game companies do with multiple choice endings and in their series, and overall I feel like that could be quite damaging to the player base. I imagine a lot of people would be pissed off by that, but again, we're gonna have to wait and see. Thank you so much for watching the video today, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more Mass Effect content, as I do cover BioWare and I will be covering all things Mass Effect for the next game. Thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for checking out my channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.